Every single season, each NFL team has some sort of expectations. Some of them manage to exceed what was to be expected. Some do as well as we thought they would. And then there are some that do so poorly that fans just can't wait to move on.
Oh, the ride is finally over.
Now there's fallout happening everywhere. Literally, Russell Wilson's responding, Sean Payton's responding. Feels like the Denver Broncos organization is responding.
If you were to simply look at the Denver Broncos record compared to how they did last year, there would be no reason to put them in this video. After all, oddsmakers had them at about 8 to 9 wins. But with the drama that they have dealt with throughout the season, I couldn't make this video without at least mentioning their name.
Sean Payton came in here with his chest all out. That was the worst coaching exhibition I had ever seen.
About Nathaniel Hackett last season.
Yes. And you just got 70 dropped on your dome. A 50-piece and 20 extra flats at no charge. A 70 spot.
So for starters, they basically had 2 different seasons within the same season. The disastrous first 6 games, and then everything after that. There's no arguing that they were the biggest laughingstock in the league after starting 1-5, which included Miami dropping 70 on them and the Jets beating them, which was ironic after Sean Payton's comments about the team's previous coach, who was now with the Jets.
He said everybody's got a little stink on their hands. It's not just Russell. It was a poor offensive line. It might have been one of the worst coaching jobs in the history of the NFL. That's how bad it was.
After the first 6 games, Denver put together an impressive turnaround. But this is still all overshadowed by the recent news of Russell Wilson's benching and the aftermath of that.
They came up to me during the bye week and beginning of the bye week on Monday or Tuesday, and they told me that if I didn't change my contract, my injury guaranteed that I'd be benched for the rest of the year. I was definitely disappointed about it.
The NFLPA says that this is a violation of the CBA, and ultimately, it seems like these 2 parties are headed towards divorce. This is a disaster considering how much the Broncos owe Russ and how much they gave up to get him. Alright, let's move on to the first real team of this video, the New York Jets. Now, you might be thinking that this isn't fair. You could make a solid argument that the Jets shouldn't be here because Aaron Rodgers tore his Achilles on the first drive of the season. But I'd argue that there's a lot going on in New York beyond just that injury that makes this team disappointing. For starters, not only did they bank this season on Aaron Rodgers, but they allowed his band of brothers to tag along as well. Offensive coordinator Nathaniel Hackett, wide receivers Randall Cobb and Alan Lazard, and quarterback Tim Boyle. Because of desperation, they completely accommodated to Aaron Rodgers' wants and desires, which backfired.
Why the Jets fans think this is even bigger is because their first reaction is, oh, Rodgers loves Hackett. Bring in Hackett. Is that an indicator that we are going to go get Aaron Rodgers as well?
Nathaniel Hackett did a god-awful job in Denver this past season. You're the New York Jets. Come on. You didn't have to go in this direction. Nah.
Hackett doesn't appear at all to be a good coordinator. Those 2 receivers have less than 400 yards combined through the first 15 games of the season, and Tim Boyle was terrible when he had to fill in at quarterback. I make the point about Boyle because they really brought him in over Joe Flacco. Obviously, this is a lot easier to say with hindsight, but they really thought that Tim Boyle was a better option. Also, if you watched Hard Knocks, we were sold that Rodgers' mentorship of Zach Wilson was going to pay dividends, which it clearly didn't.
Flag is out. Ball intercepted.
Anyways, I also think that even if Rodgers never got hurt, this team still would have struggled mightily offensively. Their offensive line through 16 weeks is ranked dead last according to PFF. It was even evident that it was going to be an issue for Rodgers on the play he got hurt. Also, the defense was supposedly the strength of this team led by Robert Saleh, but they've only been average as a unit at best. To make matters worse, they got torched by former quarterback Joe Flacco in the final Thursday night game of the season. Even if Rodgers comes back next season, how much faith can you really have in a 40-year-old quarterback coming off an Achilles injury with the worst offensive line in the league? Moving on to number 2, how about the only offense in the AFC that looks worse than the New York Jets?
Jones under pressure from Simmons, picked off, Isaiah Simmons.
The New England Patriots weren't great offensively in 2022, but man, they have been such an embarrassment in 2023. After another underwhelming offseason with a few splash signings like Juju and Zeke, the Patriots just look behind the rest of the pack. If you want to talk about all-time bad offenses, the Patriots have only averaged 14 points a game, which is the worst in the NFL.
Jones up, hit by Granderson, intercepted on the ricochet.
And their 3-game stretch from week 10 to week 13 is one for the books. Despite holding all 3 opponents to 10 points or less, they lost all 3 games, including being shut out by the Chargers, who have one of the worst scoring defenses in the league. It appears evident that former first-round quarterback Mac Jones is not going to be the starter for the Patriots next year, or probably anywhere. He's managed to rank second to last in the league in passer rating while throwing more interceptions than touchdowns. Overall, this franchise is in a tough spot. They're about to part ways from legendary head coach Bill Belichick, which is surreal considering his legacy. And they have no idea what the future looks like at quarterback. With a roster that's pretty lackluster, it feels like a true rebuild in New England is on the horizon. Moving on to the final AFC team in this video, we have the Los Angeles Chargers.
You can stop asking that question, okay? I'm going to be calling the defenses, okay? So we're clear. So you don't have to ask that again.
After blowing a 27-0 lead in the wildcard last season, some saw that debacle as a fireable offense for head coach Brandon Staley, but ownership decided to give him another chance. The good news, though, was that Herbert was now officially going to be this team's quarterback for the foreseeable future, as the team signed him to a massive 5-year deal. After a low-key offseason otherwise, the Chargers reloaded for 2023 as a team that was expected to, like last year, make it to the postseason. But things quickly went sideways. In a plethora of close games, the Chargers constantly found themselves on the losing side.
Johnston can't pull it in.
With the inability to close games, this team just flat out underperformed. The offense was a shell of itself, especially after Mike Williams went down, and the defense that was already mediocre got worse. After management had given Brandon Staley another chance, he was finally canned mid-season after maybe the most embarrassing loss of the season of any team.
Brandon Staley, I hate to say this because you don't ever want to call for somebody's job, but they should fire him they should make history. They should fire him at halftime.
Now the question is, who do they hire as head coach next season? It always seems like the Chargers are just that one team that always has a solid quarterback, but can't seem to get anything else right. Moving on to the NFC, we have the Carolina Panthers.
There has been a trade for the #1 overall pick, the Carolina Panthers and the Chicago Bears making a deal.
After trading DJ Moore and a bunch of picks to move up to #1, the Panthers selected Bryce Young, who many deemed as the top quarterback prospect of the class. With the hiring of offensive-minded Frank Reich, this team was expected to be around a 7 to 8 win team with possibly the Rookie of the Year in Bryce Young. But rather quickly, things turned ugly. There were certainly question marks in regards to Bryce Young's size and mobility. Historically, a 5'10" quarterback that's less than 200 pounds would be lucky to get drafted, let alone #1 overall. But the tape at Alabama showcased a special player who managed to overcome his size with remarkable intangibles. His calm demeanor, ability to process defenses, and accuracy got him comparisons to Drew Brees. But in 2023, with an old Adam Thielen as his best target, Bryce Young has been the worst quarterback in the league, completing less than 60% of his passes with the lowest passer rating in the NFL.
He looks beyond small. I mean, you can't get any smaller. He's literally the smallest quarterback that's ever going to be drafted that high. He looks like he weighs 150 pounds. Listen, I like Bryce Young. I thought he was a really good player in college. I'm pivoting off that take. If you sat Dave Tepper and Frank down right now, they would have to take those other 3 quarterbacks over this guy.
Combine that with a defense that has regressed heavily, and you get the worst team in the NFL that won't even have the #1 pick because they traded it to Chicago to move up for Bryce Young last year. What's wild is, despite this only being Frank Reich's first year in Carolina, the impatience of the Carolina ownership led to Reich being fired mid-season, which is already starting to feel like Carolina is going to be a joke moving forward. To make matters worse, the quarterback selected after Young, CJ Stroud, has looked like a Pro Bowl level talent right off the bat. Now, we only have one team left in the NFC that I consider truly disappointing. Teams like Arizona, Washington, and Chicago weren't expected to be good in the first place. The New York Giants, however, are a different story. After becoming the surprise of the conference in 2022, there was a new level of excitement in New York that hadn't been felt in years. Head coach Brian Daboll appeared to be competent, and found a way to effectively use quarterback Daniel Jones. Jones had the best season of his career in 2022 and even had a huge playoff game and win versus the Vikings. This was enough evidence for the franchise to pay Daniel Jones in the offseason, which was a controversial move, considering that even in his best season, he was only average by league standards.
I think this is a big waste of money for the Giants. I think they was rushing to get a deal done because they haven't won a playoff game or been to the playoff and God knows when.
Still, with that playoff momentum, the Giants brought in some more talent to bolster this roster, including tight end Darren Waller, and picking up some solid talent in the draft that helped this franchise earn an A in their offseason report card according to PFF. But any excitement for 2023 almost vanished instantly.
Using the speed to the end zone for a Cowboy touchdown.
Well, Dallas felt like older, bigger kids walking into the backyard of younger, smaller kids and picking fights and winning all of them last night. Not a big fan of Daniel Jones, but I figured he'd take another step forward. Instead, he took a giant step back.
After a complete embarrassment versus their rival Dallas, this set the tone for the Giants season. They lost by at least 2 touchdowns 6 times in the first 10 games. To make matters worse, Daniel Jones looked awful in his 6 starts before suffering a season-ending injury, and the defense regressed into one of the worst in the NFL. The undrafted local quarterback Tommy DeVito was a fun story while it lasted, but the larger problems with this team overshadowed any positives, as now the team sits in limbo with questions of the quarterback moving forward, as well as problems within the coaching staff. Apparently, there's some pretty big tension between Dable and the defensive coordinator Wink Martindale. So of the 32 NFL teams, these were the ones that were the most disappointing. It sucks to be a fan of teams when they have years like this, but here's the beauty of the NFL. Take a team like Houston, who was awful in 2022. They only won 3 games and they fired their head coach. And in just 1 year, they now have a winning record, an exciting new quarterback, and overall, their future looks bright.
Can they win it? Stroud to the end zone. Touchdown!